Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project conceived entirely to let me spend more time with interesting people than I'd ever get on the radio. Although this week, that's sort of true. It's even more time than I would ever get on the radio because it's the second time, Frank Skinner, that you've done this podcast. Welcome.
How much disclosure do I have?
It wasn't full enough. It wasn't full enough.
I did it when it was called partial disclosure.
You're not the only one to come back. It's Salman Rushdie, I think, will be the second person to come back for a second bite of the cherry later this month.
Okay. I'm sorry I don't come back with that strong an anecdote.
Well, he does. His life has probably undergone more transformation since the last time we saw him than yours has.
Yes, I think that's fair to say.
What we normally do, of course, is start at the beginning and work.
Although what is bigger, losing a radio show or an eye?
It's a rhetorical question, I think. As it goes,
there'll be philosophers listening to this. That'll be their favourite bit.
I don't want to say what I enjoyed about you losing your radio show was that, but you didn't hold back, did you? You didn't, because we're great fans. When my time comes, I'm a big fan of the diplomatic fudge.
Oh, okay.
Where the station will put out a statement saying it's been a wonderful ride, but we've now decided that we've come to. But you were having none of that.
I didn't. To be fair to the station, they did say to me, if you want to pretend it's your idea, we'll back you up on it.
Exactly.
But of course, now they've said that to me, it means everyone who retires from radio, I will think, they've been sacked.
Yes,
obviously.
This is why the diplomatic fudge exists. But you've thrown the whole profession into disarray.
It's not just when anyone says I'm leaving to pursue other projects. I always think it's probably a 1,000-piece jigsaw.
but they let you on air, which is quite rare. No. They don't normally. If you worked in a bank, it's not like they'd let you into the vault if you were working your notice.
No, it was very trusting. I did about 10 weeks after I was sacked, which was, But, I think, what do I think? I think they trusted me enough that there'd be a bit of, a bit of gallows humour, but I wasn't going to lay into anyone.
Or start sort of. Well, you did weep a bit right at the end, didn't you?
Yeah, the Sun said that when the last song, "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road," played, not chosen by me, can I say, that you could hear me crying in the background.
Was that not true?
It was, but I just don't like "Goodbye Yellow." No, I wasn't crying. I wasn't crying. In fact, my producer, who was crying. I like the idea that they think my tears are accompanied by a high-pitched feminine shrieks like that.
Given the vicissitudes of showbiz, why do you think you took it so badly?
Well, I take it badly. I just didn't want anyone to think it was my idea because I've always gone on about how I love the show and how I really like the relationship with what we call our readers. And then for me to say, actually I'm leaving, would say, well, that was all phony then. And also, the show's always been about, I've announced births and deaths on that show. It's an honest show. I would feel, that last show I'd have felt pathetic if I was pretending I was leaving of my own accord.
Actually, one more question. What is it about radio? Because obviously this is my world as well. What is it about radio that makes it different from every other form of media?
Well, it makes it different from other media, but not different from life, I think is the thing. Even now, this feels much more like two blokes talking than an interview. And there is something about, not having to worry whether you've shaved. Just the idea. I mean, what I don't like that's creeping into radio now is this, can we film this bit for the socials? And I think now the great thing about radio is the audience are filling in all the blanks with their imaginations.
The trick is to forget that the cameras are there and still turn up in your pyjamas and not shave. And then I think you can just about walk the tightrope between being in an HD TV studio but sounding like you're on the radio, because it's different, isn't it? You don't sit up straight and it's a different level of relaxation.
Exactly. I want to feel like I'm on a ship putting out SOS calls, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just the noise. Anyway,
I did an interview with Nigel Farage once, and someone wrote that because it was a radio interview, but it was filmed, and someone wrote that he looked like he was conducting the interview sitting on his sofa in his pants, and that's what you're going for when you're on the wireless. On your sofa in your pants. That's the image you want people to have in their head.
What a great Prime Minister's party political broadcast that could have been. He really could speak people.
It's just a common touch. I forget precisely where we left off last time, but we'll jump around a lot and of course get on to your latest West End extravaganza. But can we start at Hales Owen College?
Sure.
Because it's just up the road from where I grew up, and I didn't know anyone else had been there, let alone sort of
I taught
worked there. I know you did. You taught English literature there.
I taught English literature at A level, and I taught drama, and I taught GCSE media studies.
Did you?
Yes. Which involved watching quite a lot of television.
That was quite early. Media studies was quite a rare GCSE.
It was then. And it was still the time where if you watched a programme, that a man would wheel it in. One of the techs would wheel in a television set on legs with the VHS recorder. And I remember he used to wear a lab coat as if he was really at the sharp end of research. But so I did that. But certainly the English literature A level was joyous to do.
Was that before or after you did your masters?
Well, no, it's after I did my masters, but I had no teaching qualifications.
Right.
But I knew a guy who worked there, and he said, "Just come and teach at the college," and that was it.
Because there was a 3-year odyssey after the masters, just to get the I right.
Yeah.
Masters odyssey, Hales Owen College.
Yeah, I basically lived in a bedsit and not working. And I suppose I suppose now I can say I wasn't looking for work, really.
It's all right. They can't come for you now.
No, I don't think so.
Come for your house.
So I lived out of the local Oxfam shop, clothes, books, the lot. And I bought things from the supermarket that had stickers that said "Eat within 20 minutes." And I was very happy living like that. I like to think there was a time when noblemen would keep a hermit on their grounds, and the idea that because he was thinking deep and religious thoughts, it would somehow, like he was a modem fitted up on, it would filter through to them. And I like to think the government was treating me in a similar manner.
And were you thinking deep and religious thought?
I was sometimes, yeah. I had a lot of spare time on my hands. Work does get in the way.
Because religion is a thing that pops up in your life quite a lot, isn't it? It comes. So I like because it's not just aristocrats that had hermits. Monks can be hermits as well. But the monastery that was attached to my school had a hermitage where you could go and live for 6 months, not as a pupil, sadly, but as a monk, and you would draw your own water and bake your own bread, and you'd be visited once a week by someone from the community who would come and bring things. So this period of your life was contemplative. Yeah.
Well, I was in Norwich last week on tour, and we realised we were in Norwich the same day as Julian of Norwich is. I don't know if you've heard of her. Her sort of feast day, she wasn't actually a saint, but and we went along she had a cell that was built on the side of a local church, and she got walled in. That's what anchoresses did. And she had 3 windows, one to get communion from the church, one to give advice to passers-by, and one, it said, for her assistant. And once I found out she had an assistant, I thought, it's not how I saw this. We were talking about it on the last radio show of, people saying, I've come for advice from Julian of Norwich to say, okay, can you do Tuesday at 3?
It knocks the gloss off a bit, doesn't it? What were you expecting to happen then when you finished your masters? Because your background was quite humble, if that's not an offensive word. You were skint. Right. There were times when your dad wasn't in work, and you had tough times. You were clearly as bright as a button, but beyond just clever. You were intellectual. You were academic. So you do a masters. Presumably, at some point in that process, you thought it would be life changing, and then you find yourself up on bricks, really, in a bedsit.
Well, it was life changing because I got an honorary degree, honorary doctorate from Wolverhampton University, and I spoke to the guy there, and I said I was giving out awards as part of my payoff. There's no such thing as a free honorary doctorate, as they say in the business. And I was handing out these degrees, and I said, "Where's the English degrees?" And he said, "Oh, we only do career-specific ones." And that English degree, both the English degrees I did, have still inform me sitting here now. They just made me analytical and made me think more about things. So I was really happy with my lot, and I'd had, what you'd call proper jobs before that. I was expelled from school, so I ended up working in factories, and I didn't want to do anything like that. And I thought maybe I could become a writer or something like that, but I never got around to it.
So you became a teacher.
Yeah.
And how did that end? What's the crossover from Chris Collins to Frank Skinner?
Well, I started doing. There was a teacher at the college I was working at who said, "I'd love to be an agent. That's my dream." And
That's a very strange dream.
It is a strange dream. Yeah. But it was quite handy because I said, "Oh, maybe I'll be a comedian." We very much put the cart before the horse. So that's what we did. So he got me some gigs, and they started to go really well. So I, as they say, quit my day job.
What was your act then? And did you become Frank Skinner straight away?
No, I began as the rockabilly Charles Hawtrey.
I can see that.
I used to thanks. I used to wear little round glasses and do like comic songs and stuff like that. But that didn't last long. And then I was Chris Collins for a while, just doing stuff. And then I tried to join Equity, the Actors Union thing, so I could do some television that I was being offered. And there was already a Chris Collins, and you can only have one. So I took a name from my dad's Domino's team.
Because other people you could have been Christopher G. Collins, couldn't you, or something like that?
I suppose I could have done. I seriously considered being Wes Bromwich.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, but yeah. I think I wouldn't be sitting here now if I was called.
It would be funny, like for a very limited and specific
for the first 2 minutes.
So we jumped ahead then. It must have gone quite well quite quickly if you were getting TV work so soon afterwards.
It did go quite well. I mean, I remember talking to a comic, and he said, "When did you start?" He was an older guy, and we were doing a club together in Birmingham, and he said, "When did you start?" And I said, December last year. This was sort of January. And he said, "I've been doing it for 22 years. He said, don't get down if you're not getting television and stuff. You have to be patient. I said, "I got television coming up in April." So
he must have loved you.
He must have. He said to me, "What?" He said, "I've been in a wheelchair twice under the strain of doing this job." And I said, "I found it something of a breeze."
Did it really come out of nowhere? Had you just literally had a conversation with someone at college and thought, well, or had you had a sort of frustrated performer somewhere doing the drama and stuff like that?
Well, people had said to me, you should be a comic and stuff. But it didn't seem... on the telly at that time, it was all cannon and ball and...
Okay.
And, though, mainstream comics... And I didn't fancy doing that. And I didn't really become aware of the other kind of comedy, alternative comedy, until Friday Night Live started.
On the telly?
Yeah. And I remember when I did my first gig, I honestly, in my imagination, I would do the first gig and I'd probably be on Friday Night Live the following week, was what I thought. I honestly thought once it was out there, how funny I was, that it would be a whirlwind. I'm not joking. I honestly believed that. And then the first gig went really badly, so that knocked me back somewhat.
Why did you carry on?
Because I had already paid for an hour at the next Edinburgh festival. I'd paid my life. I had 409 quid in the post office, and it cost 400 quid.
To book a room?
Yeah. So I'd done that before I'd done any stand-up at all. I'd booked the gig. And so, consequently, I couldn't give up. So I couldn't waste 400 quid.
So where did you derive... I mean, you were clearly funny, but where did you derive your confidence that you could be funny on stage?
Well, I just assumed at first there was no difference. I honestly thought that would be a seamless change. And the funny thing is as I did it, the difference got less and less. So in a way, I was right.
Yeah.
But you have to, I think at the beginning, you need some stagecraft to sort of give you some supportive struts up there. And then as you get confident and better, you can throw the struts away, you know.
And that is different to what had gone before, to the traditional comic, in that, you know, they'd have catchphrases and comedy.
Yeah, I just talked about my life,
right?
Which is what I still do now. Those mainstream comics are largely removed from their acts. They're very third-person comedy. A bloke went into a pub and stuff.
And how many people were doing that? How many people were standing on stages and being funny about their real life?
Well, we worked out, I remember one night in the Comedy Store, that there was 35 comics we thought who were making a living from comedy. And then about 6 years ago, I was talking to a club owner, and he had on his laptop, he had over 400 names of comics who are making a living from it. So I arrived at a very good time, indeed, because it was easier to be seen if there's just a handful of people doing it.
And was there a sort of aligning of the planets when you started making people laugh, when your gig started to go well? Did it feel like you'd come home or you'd found your oeuvre?
Yes, it was the first time in my life that I'd really found something I was very good at, and it was thrilling. The thing that always sticks in my mind is I drove back to Birmingham. I was still living in Birmingham at first. I drove back from a gig I'd done in London that night. It was probably like 1:30 in the morning on the motorway. And I started physically punching the ceiling of my car as I drove with sheer elation.
Wow.
That it was working and I could do it, and I really wanted to do it. It was, even saying that now, 35 years on, I can feel the hairs going on my neck with it.
It's luck to find it. It's not luck that you were good at it.
Well, it was partly luck at the timing, because when I arrived on the so-called alternative scene, the first gig I went, I remember someone said something about Nicaragua and got a round of applause. And I thought, well, this sounds easy, but I don't know anything about Nicaragua. And then I went up saying, you know, so I was talking to my girlfriend the other day. Somebody said, oh, my girlfriend, you own her, do you? And I thought, this is a different planet I'm on now. But someone said to me, that I sort of arrived just when people would think, I like the excitement and thrill of people doing experimental post-theatrical comedy. I wouldn't mind a joke now. Yeah. After 3 years of it, I wouldn't mind someone who did jokes. And the door opened and there I stood.
So Edinburgh went well that year in 87?
No.
You didn't?
No, it was 88.
By then, sorry.
88 was the first Edinburgh. Now, I did an hour. The most people I got in was 9. And I did one where literally no one came. Well, I didn't do it, obviously.
Because it was actually empty.
Yeah. But I used to get in there, and the show before me was 3 clowns. And they used to get all made up ready for the show. And only one day did anyone turn up for them. So when I'd walk in, there'd be 3 clowns sitting at a table talking about what to do next. It was like a fabulous...
It's like Beckett.
Yeah, it was. It really was. I felt sorry for them. So I got 2 reviews, both of which was like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. But both had a little... one sentence that said, but there's something about him. He's got something. And that was enough to keep me going.
Because you believed it?
Yeah, I believed it. And also the third gig I'd done, which was at a little alternative night in Birmingham, which I'd done as the rockabilly Charles Hawtrey, had gone really well. So I knew I could do it.
It's like the sort of the teeth of 2 cogs meeting. So once you've felt it happen once, you can live with them spinning independently of each other because you know that they're going to...
I don't know if you know that. I once had golf lessons.
Right.
And I remember hitting one shot and I thought, oh my goodness, this is why people love golf. That felt perfect. And then I never did that again. So happily, it was hit and miss, but it did continue. And during that Edinburgh, I did, there used to be a thing called the Fringe Club in Edinburgh, where you went up and did like 5 minutes of your act as a sort of advert to get people to come to the full show. And I was on, and it's had a terrible reputation for like drunken students doing terrible things to the acts. And when I was on, there was people were throwing paper aeroplanes. That was one of the things. And a guy climbed up above the stage and tipped beer down onto one of the acts. And I, at that point, had been quite a gentle, genial stand-up as I was finding my way. I was so frightened. I remember I had a cigarette. I said, I'm going to go on smoking a cigarette to make me look more dangerous. And I went out, and I was just abusive to the audience and absolutely stormed it.
Right.
And I think that was when that was the turning point. I thought, I don't have to be nice. I can just, treat them with the contempt they deserve.
And also change according to circumstance. So
yeah. But that was just fear,
Right.
I know fear gets a lot of bad press, but it can be very productive. It's probably the great motivator.
So, what would ambition have been then? I mean, if would you have had formal ambition?
My ambition was to be a regular on the to be one of those 35 people, to be
making a living.
Yeah, because like I said, there was the kind of comedy we were doing wasn't really on the telly. And I was never going to be up there with Cannon and Ball and those guys. And so, I mean, if that had been it, if I had just been doing the clubs and, getting good work, because I was getting like Comedy Store, Jongleurs was a big club I was getting that. I was doing like 5 gigs on a Friday and Saturday night, going from one to the next. And it was blissful. And, I think if I was still doing that, I'd still be pretty good with it.
Still be happy.
Yeah, because, it's a fantastic job. And then I was much more close with the comedians. We had much, when I'm in the dressing room now, it's just me when I'm on tour. But then there would be 5 of us all going through similar experiences, a bit like an NCT group. And it was comics saying, I played blah, blah the other night and it went badly. And I said, I'm not sure about that play. And I made friendship has never been one of my best skills. But I got quite a few friends during that period, certainly.
What about competitiveness? Does that kick in?
Well, then I started to get better than them, and then those friends disappeared.
It fell away. But seriously, do you?
That was serious.
Oh, okay. So you can't stay friends if one of you. I mean, if one of you is bitter.
I think you can.
Jealous.
I think you can, but I think people will forgive you anything except success.
That's quite profound in a way, isn't it? It's quite. It's because you'd have been happy carrying on doing 4 or 5 gigs a night. You'd have been on a decent scratch, because and yet there is a level at which the way you are regarded by your peers changes.
I think it's what they imagine you're thinking about them.
Oh yes. Yes.
I think that they think that you have sort of, risen up and now you're looking down on them.
Which you're not.
It's like, not at all. It's like when I got those English degrees, some of my friends and my family, like my nephew said to me, we're getting a bit worried about you with your Shakespeare badge, he said. And John Betjeman, the poet, said that the great education can make you feel at home everywhere except at home.
Crikey.
And I think that does happen, that you become a different beast. You become slightly more exotic, and then people don't trust you anymore, I think.
So you went back to Edinburgh in 91. When can you say in retrospect when you started feeling that way, when you started feeling that you'd moved up a gear from the other 34 on the circuit?
Yeah, well, I didn't feel I'd got better than them or anything. I just felt I was getting some breaks. But before 91, it wasn't, major.
Sure.
And then in 91, I won this, the Perrier Award, which was quite, at the time was a massive deal. And And then after that, I don't think I did another circuit gig, another club gig. I just went on tour, and that's how it's been since.
So you went off like a rocket, because the Perrier did that. And you should say that you beat Jack D and Eddie Izzard for people not.
And Lily Savage.
And Lily Savage was on the same.
Not to mention Avner the Eccentric, who was the 5th member of the nominees. Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by those kind of weird collections of people when 4 go on to megastardom and the 5th just sits there looking at the poster.
But he's probably doing, a festival in Belgium as we speak.
So then you become a star?
Yeah.
What was that like?
I loved it.
Did you?
I really loved
it.
Good. I don't know if you've ever seen... is it Chicago that's got that character, Mr. Cellophane, in it?
Don't know.
And that's what I felt. I felt like I'd been invisible, really, for 30 years. That I had mates, but in general, group conversation with people that weren't close to me, I felt I was fairly ignored. And then suddenly, it was like this spotlight had come on. I mean, all the time. And people were actually interested in what I was saying and stuff. And I really liked it. And I still like it.
Yes.
I know it's the thing to say celebrity's so awful because, people stop you in the street and stuff. But I don't mind being stopped in the street. If that is the price to pay for all the other stuff, I'd be very happy with that. And you become attractive instantly in a way I never was before. It was brilliant. I went to everything I was invited to, every premiere and everything. I just couldn't get enough of it.
Like a sweet shop.
Exactly. Yeah, it was that dream I used to have about being on. The sweet shop was closed, but I was in it on my own. It was like that.
So it lived up to all your wildest expectations.
Yeah, it was even better than that. I mean, it's got everything, really. I mean, people...
This is very refreshing. This is very refreshing, isn't it? To just no, it is actually. It was brilliant.
Well, yeah, but
why wouldn't you love it?
Yeah, but no one wants to lose it or give it up, but they all moan about it. And stuff. Occasionally, you get people who do walk away from it. Ronnie Barker goes and owns an antique shop when he's about 84.
It doesn't count, does it? And you, I suppose I wouldn't have asked this question at the time, but were you worried about being fulfilled and happy and famous would affect your material? Because you can stand on stage and talk about living in a bedsit or having troubles with your girlfriend, but do you a bit like the second album syndrome, when your life is by most people's standards a fairy tale, where do you find your material from then?
Well, at that point, my material was it was mainly filth. It didn't start off like that. I would write an hour of material that would be like 30 minutes of filth and 30 minutes of thoughtful
and now it's 30
creativity.
Years of
dirt. Yeah. But the audience are my editors.
Right.
So when I do the first round of the writing, if the audience laugh, that's in, and if they don't laugh, it's out. So you do that for 3 months, filtering, rewriting, adding new stuff, and then you've got an hour of filth. Because the audience have thought, I know, we like that better. So the thing is with that kind of sexual comedy is whether you're rich or poor, the truth is your sexual experiences are not that different. Yeah. It's the great common denominator of human beings. And so it didn't really matter. And then I watched the documentary about Benny Hill and had a bit of a revelation, because I was starting to get a few bob in my pocket and was a bit awkward about it with people who... I remember once I took some friends out and I said, I'll get this. And they said, no. I said, no, I'll get it. I've got more money than you guys. And I was doing it as a friendly gesture, but I think they took it as a criticism. But as I said to them, work harder. Simple as that. So I saw this documentary about Benny Hill, and he was taking up some dry cleaning, and he was picking some up and dropping some off. And the woman said to him, right, that'll be. And it was like 19 and 6 or something like that, old money. He said, how much? That's outrageous. And she said, well, you've got plenty of money. And Benny Hill said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he took out like a splayed out handful of tenors and mopped his brow with it. And I thought, that's the way to respond to having money. Just be honest about it. But, some people like it and some don't.
So people who didn't see any of your work then, when you say filth, you're talking about sex?
Yeah, I was talking about sex, and suddenly, sex was still very much, I had the zeal of the convert because I hadn't had much sex pre-celebrity, and suddenly it was everywhere, and so obviously I wanted to talk about it because it was a new, I did the Melbourne Festival once, and I saw about half a dozen games of Aussie rules football. And pretty soon I was doing 40 minutes of that because I'd never seen it before. So everything was fresh and new. And that's what sex was like. And so, I did talk about all that stuff, adventures in hotel rooms and all that thing. And it was new to me and was a different angle for people as well.
And people lapped it up, clearly.
Yeah, they did.
So you'd have been happy on the circuit and then you move into touring solo, doing your own stuff.
Yeah.
And doing telly at the same. Telly follows Edinburgh quite quickly, does it?
Well,
proper telly, like telly with your name above the title, as it were.
Yeah.
Or in the title.
Yeah, I'd done a series before I won the Perrier, but then I did a lot of things after. In those days, with that award, literally you'd get the award, you'd go to the after show party, and people from each of the broadcasters would come and offer you a deal or get you in for a meeting. It was, that quick. It's
you've made it sound that it's very serendipitous, but you took your craft very seriously. You weren't, you might have fallen into it, but you were determined to stay there. I think.
Yeah, well, I had Mike Tyson said if I'm gonna lose, they're gonna have to carry me out on my shield.
Yeah,
I did think that. I thought I've found. Putting aside all the sort of, the glamour and the premieres and the beautiful women, at the centre of it was always the comedy. That's what counted, and everything was secondary to that, and by a long way. That's why I didn't, I think, get into any real long-term relationships and stuff, because I didn't want anything that would damage that. That was my main focus, and it stayed like that, for 20 years. And I didn't want to lose it, and I thought it was inevitable that I would lose it. But I needed to be able to look back and think, well, I did everything I could, and then it was just, fate took it away.
And fate hasn't taken it away. You've managed to ride both horses.
Yeah, it's. I'm not amidst my glory years as far as celebrity and telly is concerned. Sure. But, and you got to be careful when you say this, because of course this is what someone's gonna say who's less famous than they were about how much they like their decline. Otherwise they become tragic figures. But I had a dream about 12 months ago where I was in this fabulous hotel room and I could hear this thumping. And it was someone banging at the door, telling me that I was late for something. And when I woke up, I could feel this anxiety in my stomach. And I thought, God, that's what my life was like for 20-odd years. Yeah. I was in this fabulous room, but there was always someone at the door. I had something else to do. And I like it better now. I've become more family-centric. I still work a lot, and I still take every job absolutely seriously. But now I just do what I want to do, and I don't have the tabloids turning up at my door asking me about my new girlfriend like they used to then.
And you've done some really cool stuff, which harks back to the English masters, doesn't it? You've done some amazing.
Well, it's odd because for a few years I sort of fantasised about going back into academia and just studying and living in some little flat
because
somewhere.
We're back to your hermit years. You are one of those people who does see study and learning as an end in itself.
Yes, totally.
You do derive.
I found it's almost like, I don't know what dopamine is, but when people talk about these chemicals that make you feel happy and complete and content, I get that from reading poetry or reading quite hardcore intellectual academic, literary books. And that's, I would be happy, I think, doing that. But I do a poetry podcast now, which is a bit like being an academic. And it gives me an excuse to read stuff.
Do you know, like last time I saw you, that I sensed, I don't think I sensed it, I think you said that there was a bit of resentment at people not seeing you like that, people thinking that because of coming from West Bromwich and having the accent that you had, people struggled to accept that academia could be as second nature to you as it would be to someone like Stephen Fry.
Yes.
He looks like Dumbledore. That's what people expect.
Yes.
Someone in a but it just glancing through what you've done since 2019, people have started accepting you in that space, haven't they?
Yeah, well,
they started putting you in that space.
Yeah, well, I've done, like I said, 10 series of the poetry podcast, and I've done documentary series on Sky Arts about 18th century poets and stuff. Eventually, people just have to give in and say, okay, sometimes that accent can be juxtaposed with a brain.
And that's also why I don't think anyone listening to this is going to think that you're kidding them or yourself when you talk about the contentment with the decline on one measure, because on another measure, you're enjoying yourself in entirely new ways.
Well, yeah, I am, totally. And now I just do stuff I want to do, and that's great.
How conscious are you of the calibration? So when you're on the way up, you can tick off the milestones, and everyone will think about the Frank Skinner Show and Fantasy Football League, and then Three Lions, of course, and all of these moments of absurd fame. I mean, truly absurd fame, particularly with the song, actually. That must have been some of the maddest moments of...
Yeah, well, that was a kind of fame I didn't know existed.
Exactly
I didn't know you could sort of become part of the England football team if you were famous enough.
Yeah. And it's never going to go away, that either, is it?
No,
I wouldn't have known
not.
that in advance either, that association. So you can... And then are you conscious of being on the sort of crest and then dipping down on it, just in terms of profile, not in terms of fulfillment or satisfaction, but in terms of if I could buy shares in you, the point at which the price might have started dipping?
Yeah, I think 2005, I think it was, I'd been with ITV on one of those golden handcuffs contracts for, I think, 7 years, and they didn't renew it. And I thought then, maybe this is the decline now. And you do notice difference in... There's a Thomas Wyatt poem. The guy, he was a poet in the court of Henry VIII. So this is not a new phenomenon. And he wrote a poem called They Flee From Me That Sometime Did Me Seek. And it's all about how these people couldn't get enough of me once and now they're not so interested. But then I got Room 101, which was like 7 series of stuff. And then, the stand-up was still selling out and all that. So it was... I think you can be dramatic and say this is the beginning of the end, but it could... you can have ups and downs. I think that was a down, and there's been a few ups.
And it's different, not better or worse sometimes as well.
You couldn't... I don't know anyone who's been Flavour of the Month. I guess from 91 to 2005, that's 14 years. I remember Russell Grant did my star chart and said I'd only be famous for 7 years. So I've defied the very cosmos.
I should tell people that the podcast is called Frank Skinner's Poetry Podcast, which you obviously spent a long time thinking of that title.
I did. Does what it says on the tin.
And you've done and a book as well, how to enjoy poetry, little ways to live a big life. So that's the teacher bit in you coming back to the fore, isn't it? It's
And it is something that I do really like doing. It's an intro. If you can, and as we did this with fantasy football, if you can put something that's an interest or a passion of yours anyway into your job, I mean, these blokes who open guitar shops and stuff, they're living their dream. And, they don't always do that well financially, but they're just around guitars all day and guitarists come in. just blissful.
And I mean, in the back of your mind, though, whatever else is going on, telly, radio, podcast, poetry, documentaries, in the back of your mind, you are a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, well, that's what it started with, and that feels like the sort of spine that goes through it. And I think when I'm on my deathbed and look back and people ask about regrets, and I'm not very big on regrets, but when the telly was white hot during those big expensive contract years, when I was doing like 4 series a year and various one-offs as well, I remember ITV saying, "Oh, we've put the 4 series in. If there's anything else you want to do, just add it to the contract."
Wow. Back in the sweet shop, aren't you? Really?
Yeah, exactly. But I forgot what your question was.
You would say if I had any regrets.
But what I will regret is that I didn't do stand-up during that time.
During the heady.
Because television is easier than stand-up.
Right.
And people notice you in the street more if you're on television. Literally, in that period, like I say, 4 series a year, during a series actually being broadcast and for about 2 weeks after, you notice the increase in recognition. And once the series has been off 3 weeks, you'll notice less. It's very odd.
Wow.
So I got seduced by television and thought that was it. And I regret the stand-up shows I never did.
That's interesting, because you never can again.
Not.
You can't have everything in the same space.
Yeah, if the Beatles had got back together, they would still have lost where they were in the 70s when they split up and weren't together.
I've never thought, because I'm sometimes confused when someone has gone off and conquered other kingdoms, up to and including Hollywood, but then they want to come back to stand up, and that's why, isn't it?
I think you do. There's something heroic and romantic about stand-up. When I leave a stage door with my collar turned up and it's raining and get into the car, I feel fantastic, and I feel sort of heroic and sort of noble, and I've never felt noble on a panel show.
I wonder whether the way you talk about poetry is related to the way you talk about religion, because these are both subjects where some people would take a deep breath or change their vocabulary slightly or feel their accent change. But again, you talk about, in the way that when you started doing stand-up, you'd be talking about your personal life, not like an old school comic, not with catchphrases and take my wife, all that kind of stuff. You talk about everything in exactly the same space, and that's why when you talk about religion, you sound sort of unfashionably normal.
Well, I'm aware that people think religion is strange, and even if I meet someone and they say I'm a Christian, I think,
yes,
even though I'm one as well.
Yes.
But when I sort of started talking about it, and I think what I do is yes, I have written a book, the Comedian's Prayer Book, but more often than not, it's part of talking about something else, because it's so intrinsic to me. If I talk about football, there's no reason why I wouldn't talk about religion as well. There's no reason why I wouldn't say that when I see a player cross himself and he comes on the pitch, I really want to know if he's a practicing Roman Catholic. I went to the West Brom playoff game recently, but I still went to mass on the morning. That doesn't, and then I did a gig that night. That just feels like life to me. They don't feel terribly separated.
Yes, exactly.
And one more sort of serious.
Which used to be normal. It would have been, when you were growing up, when I was growing up, there wouldn't have been this weird separation.
But the people who speak to me about religion, often I think, they recognise the weirdness, but I think people are kind of interested about it. If you mention confession, people love that. That's what somebody kneeling in a box speaking through a grill.
Yes.
I mean, they love it. But I think that's one thing I love about the Catholic Church is its strangeness. I think that's an important part of it, because there isn't enough.
There's a theatrical strangeness. There's a theatrical strangeness.
There is, yeah. But There's a Gerard Manley Hopkins poem when he talks about things that are original, spare, and strange, and those are the things he's drawn to. And the fact that I do hold rosary beads and pray in the privacy of my room, it's almost a superpower, that level of weirdness.
Do you read poetry every day?
Yes, I either read it or listen to it every day.
And you pray every day as well?
I pray twice a day.
It's quite but you're not a hermit. I've
got,
inner life
I've got a schedule.
Breakfast.
Yeah, exactly.
And we come then. So the last time we spoke, you were touring showbiz.
Can I just tell you one thing?
Go on, yeah.
My night prayers, I take the dog into the garden last thing at night so the dog can do the things dogs need to do before they go to bed. And that's where I pray. I pray under the stars, my night prayers. And the dog now has worked it out that when I cross myself at the end, it's time to go to the door because we're going back in.
We last time we spoke, you were touring showbiz. Now you've got 30 years of Dirt, a title that, for people who haven't seen it, will make more sense now that you've referred back to the filth that you referenced at the beginning of your career. So where did the idea for this show come from?
Well, I did think it was interesting that I have tried to do, because there's a sort of pressure nowadays, I think, to do something that's a bit more like theatre for comedians.
Yes.
That people like to talk about personal tragedies and stuff like that in their Edinburgh shows or whatever. And I wasn't prepared to go that far, but I did think the closest I had to a personal tragedy is that I wasn't, I know this sounds like a contradiction, wasn't taken seriously as a comedian because I am associated with the knob joke as a genre. The fact that Jonathan Swift and a great many 18th century writers and James Joyce did various knob jokes. Shakespeare does loads. Chaucer. That it's hard to really sum that up on a poster. So I thought I'm a bright bloke. I ought to be able to get wear my brain on my sleeve a bit more as a stand-up. But the show is about trying to do that, but those knob jokes just keep coming through. I just can't. They just come to me. They're constantly coming to me. And I love them as well. I grew up on that. It was, I think, coming to London, I was shocked that the comedians weren't doing those kind of gags. They were doing very political stuff. School, factory, pub. That was our lingua franca. That was how we spoke to each other. The knob joke, either a crafted story knob joke or just somebody talking about an experience or something that had happened. That was what we loved. Now, that sounds, everyone says cheap or easy and stuff like that, but you've got to acknowledge the lure of this stuff. The people love it so much. It's like it's intrinsic to us.
And it transcends class and race and all of the other stuff as well, doesn't it? Great units, another great leveller. Have you been surprised by how successful it's been?
This show?
Yeah.
Well,
because you're coming back to the West End. You've got those words, by popular demand.
What I thought about was I'm not on telly much now.
No.
And
when you are, you're talking about Coleridge.
Yes, exactly. And not being on telly or talking about Coleridge are not great ways to sell tickets. But I was aware there's a tiny group of comedians who sell tickets without needing to be on telly. They just sell it on the strength of their last stand-up show. And so Showbiz sold really well, the last tour, and this one has been phenomenal. I've been cleaning the theatres. Do you know that phrase? When it's a sold out where literally every ticket has gone. Not there's no singles or anything. And I've probably done less telly in that time than I've done in my career, and I think I'm at that stage where I can sell stand-up on the strength of my stand-up. I don't need any supplementaries to. Obviously, I'll go on telly and plug it, but I mean, I don't need to be a television presence to get people because they're happy with me as a stand-up presence.
Does it change? I don't think that you've ever been swayed by the baubles, but does what happens on stage get affected at all by not being on telly? Do you go to places you wouldn't otherwise go to, or do material you wouldn't otherwise? Some comics might, but I can't imagine you do.
I don't think so. I think I do some material about not being on telly, obviously.
Well, you couldn't do that if you were on telly.
No, I am very much. Although I was doing it the other night, and a bloke shouted, "You was on telly last night," and I thought, I'm not counting repeats.
And what's the crowd like? Do you have a proper mix? I mean,
it is quite a good mix. Yeah, I mean, I can see people who I know probably came and saw me in the 90s, and then people who I don't know like the radio show or something like that.
Will you do another radio show if you get the chance?
Yeah,
you loved it.
I love doing it. Yeah, and I'll tell you what I liked, James, best of all was having this sort of weekly voice where everything that happened to me in the week was raw material for the show. And I loved going on and just chewing over things I'd seen, stuff people had said to me, and like some fabulous public diary.
Yes.
And that's what I'll miss most of all.
And without having to hone it into 20 minutes of material or just jettison, because sometimes the stuff that's not going to get a belly laugh might have a value of its own.
Yeah, but also when you do, when you can hear the audience, sometimes you begin a subject and you're not getting laughs, and then you actually reverse out of that streak because you think there's no laughs. On radio, because I think people are laughing all the time in my imagination, I get past that, and then you find further down the street there are true riches. But if I'd been doing that in stand-up, I don't think I'd have got there because I thought, oh, they don't like this, I'll do something else. Yeah. So it's easy to keep your nerve on radio.
I don't know why, but if this was one of those dreadful mind clouds where words that have occurred to me, I think the biggest word that's come out from this conversation is freedom for some reason. I think freedom runs through every level of your career. It's partly through luck and circumstance. You've always had great freedom to pursue whatever it is you fancied pursuing on and off stage.
Yeah, and also my dad was a great one for if he fell out with someone at work, he'd leave the job, even if we then had tomato ketchup sandwiches for a month after it. He just wouldn't take any, as simple as that. And, you know, like you said about going on and saying I was sacked last week from the radio and stuff like that. And I've walked away for some good jobs because I fell out with people and stuff. And I think it's important to hold on to that. And you know, my partner, who I've been with now 23 years, Kath, in 2008, I had a phone call from the bank to say, you've lost everything. You've lost your life savings. It's literally all gone. And I sat down with Kath and I said, you better brace yourself for this. And, you know, I think I've lost everything financially. And she said, well, you know, we can always move to a smaller house. You could go back to the clubs if you have to. And I thought, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
And so that, I feel, you know, I'm very happy with my home life. I like getting back from a gig at 1:30 in the morning and there's a Green Day album on the stairs that my son has left there. I like the combination of the real and the sort of fantastic in my life.
And I suspect I know the answer to this question. Is there anything that you haven't done that you'd like to professionally?
From a poetry point of view, I wish there was a way of doing that on television where people don't say, I don't know if people will put up with this. Can we just do just 2 lines of it? And can we have some music under it? And could you wear a medieval jester outfit? Because people are frightened of poetry and they'll switch it off straight away. I wish I could find some sort. It needn't be on telly, I suppose. But, you know, as well as being sat by the radio, it means I've only got 2 series of the Poetry Podcast left now because that's tied to the same contract. yeah, I'd like to stick with the poetry, and I'd like to find a way. I think another John Betjeman quote he said about narrowing the gap between poetry and the public.
Yes.
And I'd like to be able to do that.
Is there an evangelical zeal there? Do you think you can improve people's lives by bringing poetry into it?
It improves mine.
Well, I know that, but you want to pay that forward, as they say.
Yeah, I think some people find something great in their life, and there's a famous story. Dennis Amiss, was a great hero of mine. He's a cricketer. He played for Warwickshire, as my team, and opened for England. And he tells the story of playing against, I think, an Indian spinner that no one could read. And he was taking a lot of wickets. And Dennis Amiss was batting with Jeff Boycott. It's like the third test. They were in trouble because his spinner was taking, as I say, all these wickets. And Dennis Amiss noticed something about the delivery, and he thinks, oh, God, I've worked him out. I know when he's going to bowl that delivery. And he walks down the pitch to Jeff Boycott and says, Jeff, if his arm comes and touches it, it's going to be that ball. I know how to do it. And Jeff said, I know, don't tell the others. And that's not my spirit, so I would like to tell the others.
Frank Skinner, 30 Years of Dirt, is at the Gielgud Theatre in August. You can find out more and get your tickets at frankskinnerlive.com.
It's 3 weeks.
3 weeks from the 5th.
3 weeks from the 5th
of August.
Yeah.
What do you feel like on the final question? What do you feel like on the 4th of August?
Excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose, will it be nerves? I don't know. You see, when I'm in the wings, I really do feel like I need a couple of people to hold me back.
Right.
Once I see the light on that microphone out there on the stage, I really, really want to get out there, yeah.
And you'll keep doing it for as long as you feel like that?
Yeah, exactly. Even
if there's only 9 people in the room?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Well, if it's a small room, but maybe not the Gielgud.
Frank Skinner, thank you.
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure.